topics tonight.
Looks like some of you still getting yours going because there's more than 6 people here.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, we're good.
Mr. Warner?
This will keep us busy. Do you want to answer that one first?
Yes, I have a question here. I'd like to know who my mother paid for this one. No, I'm kidding. This is anonymous. What are Unity and CSL's view on reincarnation? So this is the exact same question my mother asked. So I didn't know. For sure what was happening there. So I don't know about CSL, but I've got the Unity thing right here. I printed out, and I can tell you where to go to look it up your own self on the unity.org website. And it's answered by a fellow by the name of Ed, Reverend Ed. Doesn't say his last name, but it's in answer to a question that someone sent in to Unity. I need to know where is the background, the foundation in the Bible about the possibility of reincarnation. And the point of view of the Unity Church, what is to understand about reincarnation? Thanks Ed Ford for the time to answer. Father, Mother, God bless you always, someone by the name of Guillermo. Okay? So basically, the answer is yes. And in fact, he says, Reverend Ed says, I think Unity's understanding of spiritual truth cannot possibly make sense unless we accept the idea of reincarnation. And he goes on to discuss this, which you can look for yourself. But he talks about how we achieve that new dimension of the consciousness that Jesus called the kingdom of heaven. That how else would we be able to, surely not in one lifetime, be able to do what we need to do to achieve that? And he says it's difficult to point to any specific teaching or passage that directly speaks to the question, but it's in our collective consciousness and references. And I found another thing that was written by Charles Fillmore, and it's quite lengthy, so I didn't bring that. But you can look for that yourself on unity.org archive. And he talks about how it is Jesus' consciousness, and he talks about the idea of this moving forward into the kingdom of heaven, the same as Reverend Ed. So I hope that answers half of your question.
So I guess I'm the other half. So when Ernest Holmes addresses this question, he speaks in the first person, sort of for the first time in some ways. So he says, this is what I believe. He's not teaching it as a teaching necessarily for everyone to believe. What he has put out for everyone to believe is that our spirit, our entity, the essence of who we are, evolves and lives forever. What happens in terms of whether it's reincarnation back to the earth plane or somewhere else, Ernest Holmes' personal belief is that we evolve upward, meaning we don't come back to the earth plane. In his mind, he sees us continuing to different levels of spiritual development. But he doesn't say that it's necessarily not true either. That basically, I believe the focus of religious science is on how we're living our life in this experience, and it's sort of left up to us to figure out what we believe in terms of the afterlife, and basically it's left up to us finding out once we get there. And so it's not a specific teaching, yes or no, in my experience of researching it.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Mm-hmm. All right, so the next question, what does Unity teach about the supernatural? I thought it was somewhat related to this one in terms of reincarnation. So do you want to answer that?
Well, I would be interested in knowing what aspect of the supernatural, because as a spiritualist minister, the supernatural is quite a wide topic. Does anyone want to expand on that specifically?
Well, I'll expand from Ernest Holmes' point of view.
Okay.
He says anything that we consider supernatural now is because of our perspective, but everything is actually natural once we get to understand how spirit works.
I love that. I love that.
So,
And also, along the same lines, remember that metaphysics, which is often thought of as supernatural in many ways, is beyond physics. That's what it actually is defined as. And so, we are students of metaphysics, beyond physics, beyond this physical world. What else?
so I don't know, that's...
Is that a good enough answer? Anybody want to get a little more specific? Okay.
One of the things that Holmes talks about too is the difference between psychic and metaphysical and mystic. And the idea, he says we can pick up on the psychic realm of what's going on in a person's mind, but that is just what's going on at that time. And the mystic is connecting with spirit itself and moving into that deeper realm. And both things are possible. What we are striving for is that mystic experience.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Bonnie.
Rattly, sorry. That's me rattling here. Okay, what does Unity and CSL teach about heaven and hell? Actual physical places? Together?
No.
So do you want more on that? Again, what I was just saying, Ernest Holmes kind of leaves up the experience beyond this physical plane to, we'll get there, we'll find out when we get there. But he does believe that we create heaven and hell right here.
Right here.
In our consciousness
Right
and by how we're experiencing life. And we can choose to create a more heaven-like experience through how we think and how we approach the world and through our spiritual practices.
And we've talked a few times in our services about what we're saying and what our words are and things like that. And when we say we have I'm going, it was a living hell. The experience was a living hell. We're talking about a negative experience, something that either we created because of our own ways of being and thinking, or something that occurred in the world that we're referring to, and this sort of thing. But it's our thoughts, our words, and our actions, and our feelings, our related feelings. So.
And we also say, whoa, okay, that one's different. It's all good, right? It's all God. God, right at the beginning you said God is good all the time. So even when we're experiencing what feels like hell, the practice is to learn to be grateful in all things and see how that evolves into maybe something that we find out later is really for our highest and best and becomes the good in our lives. So I don't think there's a lot of judging things as bad or good once we really get into the practice, and heaven and hell tends to put that judgment on things.
I'd also like to suggest that is one of the things that sets us apart from mainstream religions, and in a pleasant and happy understanding for many of us who come into the New Thought organizations and learn this. Oh, wow! That's one of the many things that sets us apart.
Yeah, we don't hold hell over your head. So if you don't show up to church on Sunday, it's okay. You're not going there. And we basically don't teach that a lot of things are necessarily wrong. We teach that you go within and you know what's in integrity with spirit for you. And so we don't use hell as sort of that thing to scare you into a certain behavior.
No brimstone here, babe.
Let's see. That one. So what do you think the role of New Thought in our somewhat chaotic world is?
Well, that's a really good question, because I believe that instead of pondering, I'm going to basically give this to her because she's got some really exciting news that they're doing. But this is what's happening. So rather than dwelling on the negative and on the oh my gods, then is to immediately, we've talked about this before, wrench your mind away and immediately pour in the love, the healing, and the gratitude. Oh my God, the world is warming up and we're going to all fry to death. Instead of that, we bring in the cooling, healing, loving prayer and thought, the visualizations that the earth is healing, and that every new thing, there are so many innovators and so many movements out there of folks trying to help, not trying, but helping to make the earth a better place and moving away from the end, as some of the naysayers are saying about. So focus, when I have something happen in my life, or someone tells me something horrible that they think is happening in their lives, I suggest the same thing to both of us, and so does Ken to me, which is, what is the good happening here? What do I want to see happening here? This is what I want to see happening. This is what I want to feel. This is what I want to be. This is how I want to feel. And it's much different, isn't it? So, and that energy brings in the healing. It's like a on-the-spot prayer, isn't it? Thank you. And Bonnie's organization has started a new movement.
No, we did, well, the whole organization,
yes, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, within New Thought itself, it's not just ours. It's part of CSL, Unity, Agape, and other New Thought movements, and it's the, I gotta get it all, Social Uplift Ministry. And it's the coming together of all of the New Thought organizations to look at how it is we might uplift our society. But I want to go back to the original teachings that we have, and one of those principles is what we focus on, we get more of. And so I think if you look at history, which I've had the privilege of interpreting, I'm a sign language interpreter as well, in many history classes, and I realized that the human experience has been chaotic probably from day one. I mean, we could label it chaotic. So this isn't anything new to the human experience. What is new about New Thought is how we approach that. So we're looking at what it is we focus on, as Reverend Tanya said, and we get more of that. Instead of looking at what we don't like, we focus on what we do like. Ernest Holmes says, stand for something and against nothing. And that's our calling, so to speak. How do we do that? How do we look at what it is we want to see in the world, visualize that, and stand for that, and just let everything else fall into place? That's how it works in our personal lives. We focus on what we want. Everything that doesn't support that falls away. We can do that also when we look out at what's happening in the world around us. And for me, it always helps me to remind myself that this is nothing new. Humankind has been going through all kinds of stuff since the beginning. And so it's how we approach it. And actually, if you look at statistics, we have far less violence in the world today than we did many, many hundreds of years ago. So we're making progress. It might be slower than we would like, but we're making progress. And I think it's because many of us are focusing on peace. We want peace. We want to learn how to live sustainably. We want to learn how to live in a way that supports everyone in the world, not just ourselves. We've come to realize that we're not here alone, that we're part of a large global system. And so I think that's where the focus is starting to shift, and we're seeing results, even though, like I said, they're not overnight, but we're seeing those results. So we keep that focus.
And speaking of results and social uplift movements,
Yes.
the pans, ponds, and toiletries bin is full to overflowing. And Teresa, back in the back, is she's going to take it over both to the Community of Hope and to La Casa, and also the food barrel. Don't forget the food barrel. So this is one thing we can do to help. There's many things we can do, and the social upliftment movement that Bonnie has been telling me about, because that's where I've heard about it, is maybe something that we can expand upon or join in with CSL on. Yes,
Tuesday night we'll be meeting to look at what is social justice and what is divine justice or spiritual justice. How does that look through the lens of New Thought, through the lens of Unity or Science of Mind? And we're going to be discussing that and figuring out as a community how we can then be of support in this local community, what it is we feel called to do as opposed to be against. So if you're interested, it's in our folder. I don't have the exact time in the top of my head, but 5:30, that's right, 5:30 to 7 here. We'll be discussing that piece of it. We will also be teaching visioning and the visioning process, because part of what we do is continue to vision, allow Spirit to speak through us so we can see what direction we're going, and we'll be doing that not this Sunday, but next Sunday after the service, after our service, after we eat. So you're welcome to come back or stick around for both services and learn about the visioning process and how we use that to guide us We can brainstorm a lot and things shift when we actually vision and let spirit move through us. So that's our intention.
Isn't that exciting? To be part of something bigger than ourselves. Thank you, Bonnie.
Okay, the next one. This is going to take a little more, I think. What is the definition of faith, and how do we practice faith?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. That's a big one.
That's good.
That's a big one. You want me to start?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll learn from you.
Some of you, and most of you know, I think, here that I recently lost my sister. But before I lost her, I was working on healing, double time and triple time, and sending her comfort, peace, whatever was the divine order. And so one of the things that I was concerned about was that I had my human fear that I was losing her. And so I didn't want to infuse my healing energy with my own personal fear. So, and I was in the position in my mind, mentally and emotionally, where I couldn't find the way. So I went out and asked for help. I called Reverend David, and he said, "Well, what's the opposite of fear?" And I said, "Well, usually it's love." He said, "Well, okay, what else?" And I said, "Well, the courage to feel, to do this thing beyond, feel the fear and do it anyway, kind of thing." And until you can have the faith until you can feel the faith and know the faith, use courage. Use courage for now, because you'll be able to get to the other places as well. And so that was once I felt the courage, because in this case I was feeling the courage for someone else in the situation for someone else, and to be honest, I was also feeling the courage for myself to accept whatever happened, whatever was going to happen, which I didn't really want to do. But I knew that it was the way to get through the fear, and it was the way to help Paula and myself as well. But it was the way to not put that fear into the healing energy and prayer work that I was doing. And so from there, I was able to achieve my faith in the situation. Other examples, I have many, many examples of faith, because I just know. You ever feel that, anybody? You just know. You just know what's going to work. Like some of us here who have moved to Las Cruces, New Mexico, who wasn't even a dot on my radar. No blips going on in Las Cruces for me in my consciousness. But once I came through here and I found a house, and we didn't have jobs here, but I just knew it was going to work. I just knew it. Anybody else feel that way? And that knowing that God, the universe, all of the divine energy that we've all thought about, or ever heard about, or saw in a movie, or read a book about, that is in that knowing, and that is the faith.
Well, I do think that faith is the opposite of fear. So I like that idea of going through courage to get to that. We do a fear to faith process, which you can actually find online if you want to ever do it yourself. But it's part of several of the classes that we teach. So if you just look fear to faith, it's open. They don't have it copyrighted, so that anybody can use it. You can find the process that takes you through. The main thing I think that process does is helps us to see what is our worst fear. And one of the things that I think in New Thought in general, it's sort of a tendency, and it comes out of some of our background going all the way back to Christian Science, I think. We tend to not want to look at what we're afraid of. We want to ignore it. So what the fear to faith process does is allows us to look at it in a safe way through meditation to really see how that feels, and then move into what feels right, what it is we want. And many times when people experience it in their mind's eye first, they realize, oh, I can survive that. I can create what I really want, and they can shift their thinking over to that. And also part of the process that we go through, and I imagine teachers in Unity as well as our practitioners will take you through a process of what is it you really believe? What's going on behind that fear? Where's that belief that needs to be healed? So sometimes we think we're afraid of one thing and there's something deeper under there. So we help you to dig for that and say, what is really going on here? And once we get it, then we can go, oh, okay. What do I believe? What are the principles that we believe? You know, do I really believe God is part of me? Well, if that's true, then what am I afraid of? You know, do I really believe that everything works for my highest good? Well, if I really believe that, what am I afraid of? So it's taking ourselves through those processes to reach that place. And yes, there have been plenty of times in my life too where I've gotten to take myself through it. And one of the things that I want to put a plug in for the teachers and the practitioners in our community, because even as ministers, we don't stop having those fears. They don't just disappear. So we have our own prayer partners. We have our own people that work with us and help us reach a place of centeredness. So use your practitioner, use your teachers to pray with you, to talk to you, to listen to you and help you recenter if there's ever a sense of fear that needs to shift into faith.
Beautiful. Thank you, Bonnie. Oh, thank you, Ken.
So, any other questions out there related to all this? Because the last question is sort of more of a technical thing. Any other questions related to what we teach or believe? Well, somebody asked here, it's to me, what are some of the techniques CSL has used to increase membership? Showing up. Prayer. I really do believe that eating together, socializing, which the crossover between when Unity leaves and we come in, that time together is, I think, really important. Because people like coming together, supporting each other, sharing something, whether it's a snack or a meal. I really believe that's helped us grow, and also the classes that we teach. Because when you listen to us for 20 minutes, that's very different than spending 10 weeks with the same group of people developing friendships and connections. And so those classes also help people to feel more connected to this community because they're connected to each other. It's been my goal to not let this become a personality church. That's why I don't speak every Sunday, for me. Now, I also was requested not to speak every Sunday by the board when they first hired me. But I like to have it be about the teaching and the principles and not about a certain person's gregarious personality up here. So that's been my intention.
In Unity, on the Unity website, you can actually see it. And they talk about the difference between a ministry-based or a minister-based ministry and a mission-based ministry. So that is something to think about, right? So why Unity, in this case, why Unity in this community? Why not just go to CSL, right? Why not have many people speaking? Why not? What sort of things are you looking to hear and things like that? So.
And so I think when you say why Unity and not just go to CSL, one of the things that I think I saw in a question last week, somebody wrote and left there, but it hasn't come up this week, is what is our relationship to each other? And that's why I brought the timeline and why we brought some of this information. Because essentially, the Fillmores actually were around before Ernest Holmes. They were a bit older, and Ernest Holmes was reading all of this stuff. But what I like to say, because this is how I've pictured in my mind, is if you go back to when these folks were teaching, it was before we had television and 5 million channels that we could choose from. It was before the internet, when we could instantly find out what's happening on the other side of the world, much less on the other side of the country. And so the teachers, Ernest Holmes and the Fillmores, both studied with Emma Curtis Hopkins at different times. And she had originally studied with Christian Science with Mary Baker Eddy. And she, as a mystic, took off on her own. And so I see it as we are basically teaching the same principles and the same ideas. It's just Holmes took it back to California and it started to grow there. And the Fillmores took it to Kansas City in the Midwest and it started to grow there. And just like in a language, when you're in a different part of the country, you have a little bit of a different accent. Well, the way it's taught has just a little bit of a different accent sometimes, but really, the differences in terms of the churches mostly vary based on who's leading them.
Speaking of which, can you talk about the MOA?
MOA.
The Memorandum of Agreement?
Oh yes, now both Unity and CSL have agreed between them that our ministers can go back and forth between centers. They don't have to, like a Unity minister can be hired to CSL and vice versa, and they don't have to go through a whole lot of hoops where other ministers would in order to be hired on. So there's an agreement, a recognition that we are part of the same teaching. We've just sort of grown up with a little different accent, is the way I see it.
And we're both members of both Unity and Centers for Spiritual Living, members of is it the International New Thought Alliance?
There's two, two different organizations.
Did I say that one right?
And we're part of both of those.
Oh,
Yeah. So the overall umbrella is the New Thought Alliance, the larger New Thought movement. Divine Science is part of that. Agape broke off from the centers years ago, and they have their own classes and teaching, and it's all part of it. So you can see our family tree up there.
Agape's on the lower right.
So one of the things that I like to point out, so let's see here. I'm going to pull this off here. Okay, this is small, but I want you to see here. This is Charles Fillmore, Myrtle, and Ernest Holmes. Hold this for me so I can talk. There we go, so they can hear me. Hello. Okay, so they're teaching and writing right about in here. And this is where the economic depression took place. See where they are? And this is where the Great Depression took place in our U.S. history. World War I, right here. World War II, right here. So when we say, how does Science of Mind, how does Unity, how does New Thought address a chaotic world, think about the chaos that they were starting up these teachings in. And when I think about that, I realize, wait a minute, I'm grateful to be where we are today. And to have this teaching be a part of what this country has had to help it evolve past the Depression, past the world wars that they've been in. And so when I see that, to me it helps put it in that social context to realize that we have a powerful thing here, and it helped people then, and it continues to help people now.
Thank you.
So that's why I like
really puts it in context, doesn't it? And thinking about it, we talked about how James Dillard Freeman wrote the Prayer for Protection during the beginning of World War II. Imagine all the other things that came forward, like she said, at the time, the teachings and the things that we take for granted today as part of our teachings and unity principles, as knowing and having the struggles going on in the world in the backs of their mind, very similar to what this new social upliftment industry is doing today.
So this last one, maybe you know the answer to that.
Who or what is Masaharu? Who wrote this? Okay, Taniguchi Sachinote. Did I say that well enough? Okay, I have no idea. That might be something we could look up and find out for you and answer in the future. Is there something that you know about it?
No, I just had never heard that, or, I saw that on the paper that went around, and I thought, boy, what is that?
Okay.
On the paper?
It must be on the family tree. Okay. So this person is on the family tree.
Okay, yeah, we'll have to look that up. One of the things that I think is important to note also is that part of our family tree, if you go back far enough, on the other side, not the one that looks like this, but
Yeah, there you go.
yeah,
Thank you.
it takes you, it only goes back as far as Emerson and Quimby. Sometimes when you get all the teaching around this, it goes all the way back to the Greek philosophers. And we look at the influence that they've had down the line on how it is that we think today. So one of the things that I think is really exciting about New Thought is it pulls from all of these different people, all of these different teachers, all the people that have spent time contemplating, meditating. It's not just a single tree, so to speak, a single line. It's a whole lot of branches that pull together. The people that founded these movements read all kinds of spiritual texts, not just the Christian scriptures. And so there are a lot of different influences, and they say they pull the best from everything.
And if you look on the one that was up, you can put it on the right side up, you'll see the Self-Realization Fellowship that Daniel's a member of, and also if you flip it over, you'll see, I see the Masaharu, I see him now, thank you. You'll see Agape International, Michael Beckwith, you'll see Christian Science, you'll see Divine Science. On one of them, you actually see Universalist Unitarian. So we're a big family, or we're a big, like she said, we're all part of a similar heritage, and it's not just church centers for religious science, and it's not just unity. There's many of us. There's many New Thought organizations out there.
Many parts to the family tree. And one of the things that I like too is that I used to covet these, I will admit, when I would go over to the Unity Church, because I really love the fact that we support people on all these paths, that we don't teach that this is right and that's wrong, but rather everyone has a piece of the truth and we can learn from each other. And that's part of what really attracted me to New Thought. So it was, for me, a real gift to get these up on the walls over here.
She was excited.
I was very excited.
Yeah,
because I love those and was always trying to figure out how to get a set for here. So that's part of the teachings, that we support all these paths, that we recognize there's truth in all of it. And Ernest Holmes always said, don't take someone's God away from them or religion away from them. This can augment what they're doing. In fact, I found it very interesting to learn that aside from in the United States, in most other countries, when New Thought is introduced, it's introduced through a study group or a philosophy, but the main church of that country still is intact and most people still attend that, even if they study unity teachings or religious science or New Thought teachings. They just use it to enhance where they are, which was Ernest Holmes' intention. I don't know about the film.
It was Charles Fillmore's intention from the beginning that unity would be an augmentation to Christianity. So Christian churches would be able to use the unity philosophies and principles in addition to whatever church they were going to. Like I think I mentioned before, the rub was when people started having a conflict between the belief that God is within us and everywhere around us, and not just somewhere up in the sky. That was the difference. But that was the original intent, was that he would do the same as Ernest Holmes.
There were a few other differences that make it bigger difference to mainstream Christians than they do to us. And that is that we also don't believe you need to be saved per se. That there's not this idea that you're really groveling sinners and need to be saved. So we see the perfection of God in everyone, no matter what they're experiencing, and we see sin as missing the mark, not as something that's going to take you to that hot place that we talked about earlier. And so for some people, that's the crux of the Christian teaching, which then we don't teach. And so that makes it difficult for them to apply this. But on our end, it's like, well, if you want to believe that, it's done unto you as you believe.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Are there any other questions?
Oh, look at that one.
Okay, yeah, that last slide, I just thought you'd like to know, actually, and I thought someone was going to ask, so I thought I'm going to be ready for this one. Where in the world is unity? Go back to the globe, please. That global picture, yes. There you go. And in the center, you'll see all the countries. If you go on unity.org and you say find a church near you, and you put in where you are or what country you're in or whatever, it will show. These will populate, and so you see where silent unity is in all these other countries, but also that list in the center is just a church is in that country, which I was very impressed to see.
Yeah. And they have a similar one on the CSL site, and we're in almost 400 different centers in about 40 different countries. So it's similar. We're probably right sisters all over the world.
As we are in most other cases.
Yeah.
And my understanding was that Holmes and Fillmore were buddies. And they actually, and also Mary Baker Eddy, that they actually did salons.
She
and so
was,
on.
not Mary Baker Eddy, I'd say.
No.
She was way before.
I see.
Yeah. And Emma Curtis Hopkins broke away from her.
That must be who it was, yeah.
So Emma Curtis Hopkins, if you read this, and it's quite lengthy, but this is a great history of New Thought. And there's also one that I really like called Each Mind a Kingdom. And that was a dissertation written by a woman looking at the role of desire in New Thought and what we teach about it. And that was kind of interesting too. This one here, she's got all the different teachers with New Thought. And some of the teachers taught that the desires were bad, that they lead you astray, and the other teachers taught that your desire was God moving through you. And so some of the New Thought teachers followed the one teaching and some the other. So she did her whole dissertation on that and turned it into the book called Each Mind a Kingdom. But again, for me, that book showed me the social context that all of this was going on as it was developing. And so the thing that I found interesting is in one of Ernest Holmes' lectures that they transcribed, he talks about going to Florida and how the people in Florida were just like the people in California and how surprised he was. And I realized then that thinking back to what it was like to travel, Florida seemed like the other side of the world. We didn't have Facebook to see what's going on in Florida every day if we've got friends there. We didn't, we wrote letters back then and they took a week or two to get there. So it was a different experience, and so he was seeing even people in Florida as being maybe a different country. And so the world has sort of shrunk and come together given everything, and so that's the way I think we thought too. It's starting to spread. We have a center in the Ukraine. And so it's just really amazing to see.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any questions left? Okay. Well, I think we can ask them, each of us can ask them a question to ponder. For my part, I would like you very much to ask yourselves the direction and the future you'd like to see for our church here in Unity of Las Cruces, and what kinds of things you'd like to see us doing, and what kinds of things you'd like to hear about. Okay, and we'll have a meeting or a service about this sometime, but not right away. So you've got some time to think about it.
What question? Whoa. What can you do to take this teaching out into the community? And what can we, as combined communities, do together to strengthen the awareness of New Thought in this community so that we can bring this blessing out there? Because we don't proselytize, so that's the challenge. We live the example And so what can we do to set that example out into the community?
Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you very much. And now, we're going to have a nice relaxation moment. I'm not going to do my meditation as planned. We'll do that another time. Barry, we can relax and meditate while Barry plays for us. Special instrumental.